David Lau here with Popular Woodworking Magazine. We visited Kerry Pierce at his home shop in Lancaster, Ohio, and he took us on a tour of his shop and his home. And in this video, we're going to check out his hand plane collection. Maybe you could show us one of the first planes that you started with.
Well, this is not just one of the first planes I started with. This was the very first plane. My dad, who was a cabinet maker, gave me this plane in 1957 when I was 7 years old. It's a little Corsair block plane, and I doubt very much that anybody has ever taken a shaving with it, but this was my first woodworking tool. As you can see, I've gotten kind of goofy on the subject of hand planes in the years since. When I started to use planes in a semi-serious manner, you know, I got the planes that everybody gets. We've got this Stanley block plane here, and then probably in most of the shops in America you're going to see one of these. I also picked up at some point a smoother, a Stanley number 4, and then a Stanley number 5. And for years those were my only planes. And I use them primarily the same way most guys with machine shops use them. That is, I use them to touch up an edge and maybe make a door narrower. But in 2003, I had a bout with stage 4 cancer, given less than a 20% chance of living. I got into a clinical trial at the James in Columbus, and I surprised everybody, including myself, by surviving. And one of the things my oncologist told me is he said that to improve my general health, I needed to reduce my exposure to dust. So I decided to make an effort then to change to hand planes as opposed to machine sanding. And I've never enjoyed machine sanding.
Sure.
You know, it's dirty, it's noisy. Planes create a much more quiet, a much more tranquil shop environment. And I think the end product is better too. Not at first. I think when you're first beginning to learn how to use a hand plane, it can be very frustrating to produce the kind of surfaces that you want. And then I started to put this collection of hand planes together. And it continues on down here to the wall and continues in this cabinet and that cabinet.
So one of the things that I have found as I've started acquiring my planes is that on the market right now, when you go on eBay and often in antique stores, you come across the corrugated soles a lot.
Corrugated, yeah.
Yeah. And did you ever dabble with the corrugated, or have you always?
I have some. I think my 7 might be corrugated. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the theory was by removing that metal on the sole, you reduce the amount of friction, but I think in actual practice, you find that that's not really true.
Yeah.
Patrick Leach, a plane dealer with a wonderful internet site on Stanley plane history, talked about a corrugated sole he'd encountered once. A guy who'd been buying planes from him heard that the corrugated soles were better than the smooth soles, so he corrugated his own. Only he corrugated them across instead of lengthwise. In the area of modern manufactured planes, I think the 2 leading contenders are clearly the Veritas line and Tom Lee Nielsen's line of planes. In fact, Lee Nielsen, I think, is the prime motivating force in the plane making field. He's the one who made it possible for everybody in America to own a really well done plane. I've got here a group of Lee Nielsen planes, and then up here a group of Veritas planes. They're all manufactured. These are manufactured in Canada. The Lee Nielsen are manufactured in Maine. And every one of these gives you a really good performance right out of the box. They're a little pricey. I don't know the exact prices of any of these, but I know that they're in multiple hundreds of dollars. But it's still infinitely less than it would cost to buy an even better plane, that is an infill plane, either one manufactured by a contemporary maker or an antique plane. Now on the next rack here, these are, I think, the ultimate in bench planes. They're infill planes, and they're called that because the metal shell is stuffed with wood, as you can see here. You've got the tote, and then around it there's wood stuffing, and then on the bun on the front end you can see below it there's wood stuffing. The thickness of the metal and the weight of the wood combine to give this plane enough mass that it's not going to be stalled out on a knot or a bunch of troublesome grain. In all likelihood, if your iron is sharp, it's going to scoot right past those areas. This particular plane here is an Infill Jointer that I made from a kit sold by a German man, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Gerd Fritsch. He sent me the unassembled metal parts. I'm sorry for the rust on this, I should have cleaned that off. I dovetailed these sides to the base, following Gerd's instructions. Then I made the bun, the tote, and the filling from what I harvested in our woods, and the result is a really weighty plane. This is a jointer. You could also use it as a foreplane. This is an English infill plane made by the Stuart Spears Company, probably around the turn of the 20th century. It's also a simply wonderful plane with all the mass and stability that you need to deal with troublesome wood. Believe it or not, although this is longer than a Stanley No. 5, it's considered a smoother. And here's an example of another infill panel plane. This was made by the past editor of Popular Woodworking magazine, a guy most of you are probably familiar with, and that is Chris Schwarz. It also was made from a kit, one offered by the Shepherd Tool Company. In addition to that, Chris made a smoother, again from a kit offered by the Shepherd Tool Company. And these are both magnificent tools. They have the weight, the stability, the big thick iron. You know, everything you need in a cutting tool is here. And then I have a couple of other infill smoothers. This is a Stuart Spears plane that came to me in pieces. There was a big chunk out of the bun. I grafted in some new rosewood. This was broken into several pieces. I cleaned up the surfaces and re-glued them, and then I turned a long, probably, I guess, 3 or 3.5 inch screw up through that wood to give it some strength. And then this is yet another Stuart Spears smoother. These planes, I think, are the best that you can buy. Unfortunately, they're pretty pricey. This one is probably going to be $300 to $400, and that's going to be true for these other smoothers as well. The panel planes are probably in the $400 and $500 range, and this jointer is going to cost you, well, probably several thousands, maybe $2,000 or $3,000.